Mizzou is on the hunt for a new football coach, and we talk about it on today's SportsBeat KC, presented by Big O Tires. It's Tuesday, December 3rd. Star columnists Vahe, Gregorian, and Sam Mellinger join me, Blair Kerkhoff, in studio to discuss the rationale behind firing Barry Odom. After a break, we talk about what we believe Missouri Athletic Director Jim Sterk will be looking for in a new coach, and hang around to close to the end of the show when I give you the person I believe best fits what Mizzou is seeking. Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian are here, and we're going to talk about the Missouri football coaching position. But I want to talk about it in two ways. We should discuss candidates and who might succeed Barry Odom. But first, I want to get into the idea that a coaching vacancy, especially at the major college football level, is an opportunity to define or make a statement about the program based on what the ambitions are, the expectations are of the team and the program. Look, Missouri made a statement on Saturday by saying this coach, who is a true son, right? Missouri spent more than half of his life at Mizzou and was not under 500 with 25 and 25 over 4 seasons, was not enough for Missouri to go forward in football. Vahe, you've spent a lot of time over at Mizzou this season, and you and I talked about it last week. I think we had a split decision on what we thought would happen. Were you surprised by the move?
Not quite, because I was in the process of our split decision, I was persuaded by your argument more than mine. and I did also, though, even after we recorded that, I talked to a few people in the days after that got me thinking this is more likely than not to happen. And I think I think you got into this point, Blair, but I think that this is certainly something that I've come to feel. It's sort of, where's the sizzle? What are you going to sell for next year after this? This had the appearance of being a schedule and a team that would be on the high point of a cycle. And it wasn't that. Instead, it was just a non-losing season, and barely. I think, it sounds simplistic, but I think they would have had more of a dilemma if they'd beaten Tennessee or if they'd beaten Vanderbilt. Maybe it would have just been too much to say we can't fire a guy after this. It's kind of interesting to think about also where the NCAA penalty came into this. If they had not been turned down, rebuffed on their appeal, and been granted a bowl game, would we be having this conversation right now, or would they have had to wait another month? I don't know. It's hypothetical. I mean, I guess I kind of think we would be having this conversation now, actually, anyway.
I think there would be an interim coach for Missouri right now if they were preparing for a bowl game.
I think that's right. But finally, I'd just say this. You really had a feel for it in a way that I think I didn't. I just didn't think Missouri was at this place where they're like, okay, it's 4 years, you had your time, we're going. And I do think it might have looked a little different if it had been the same athletic director who hired him. He just had more invested.
There are arguments to be made that, and you made them, that the first season was sort of a do-over. That Barry Odom would get it was as if he was a third-year coach and not a fourth-year coach because of the problems he inherited from the 2015 team and season. And again, the hiring was, I think, made in part. Missouri talked to some other candidates, but they ended up hiring Barry Odom because he was Missouri. He was a Mizzou guy, and it was a place that needed healing at the time. But in the end, it didn't buy him any extra consideration from Jim Sterk. And you make the good point, Vahe. Sterk didn't hire Barry Odom. Sam, did that make it easier for Sterk to make the decision he did?
I don't think there's any doubt, right? Like, and Vahe, you've written about this, Gary Pinkel was almost in the exact same situation after his 4th year, right? Like record-wise. But if the AD fired Gary Pinkel at that point, Mike Alden would have been firing himself. That's a huge. And I also think 2019 is different than 2003 or whatever the 4th year was. I'm getting the years mixed up. I thought Jim Sterk was really honest in that press conference where he basically said, look, like, we put a lot into this with a lot of resources, time, energy into the season with, the end zone, facilities and, all this money that had been spent. And it was basically the coach didn't hold, his weight. He didn't pull his weight on this. We set this up and, Gabe DeArmond had this line that I can't get out of my head. Mizzou had a schedule this year that looked like it was set up by Barry Odom's agent. It was set up for them to win at least 8 and 9, maybe 10 games. And then you have some real momentum going forward. And, it was a prove-it year. I know he had the extension almost exactly a year ago, right? But there's extensions and there's extensions, right? Like I think that extension just kind of lowered the buyout and, made this palatable. So, it was a prove-it year, and he didn't prove it. They moved backwards. It's a brutal business. I shouldn't use that word. He's paid millions of dollars. But it can be a cutthroat, cold business when you don't perform to expectations. I think that's what happened.
And one other point to riff off of what you were just saying, Sam, it is different for a lot of reasons today than it was in the early Pinkel years, but none more so than the reality of the SEC.
Yeah.
And you're playing at this level. You've made this move. It's that much more of a financial investment, and I think you can make the case. Not even make the case. It's just a truism that urgency is different. The timing is different. The more you stand still, the more you fall behind.
Yeah. Two points. I've been around long enough to understand that extensions are for recruiting purposes. They have nothing to do with whether a school decides the coach is the right fit or not.
Well, with one exception, is what that buyout is.
Right, but I think that gets folded into everything.
Yeah.
There are conditions that are created in the contract. Yep. I've never known a program in men's basketball or football to not make a move on the coach because of the size of the buyout or the contract. It just there's too much at stake financially to keep the wrong coach.
Yes, yeah, and nobody. There's no such thing as a lame duck college coach either, and there's coaches that have turned down extensions because they included, we're going to take that buyout down to $250,000 or whatever, and that means you're gone.
Yes,
you
absolutely.
You just signed your own firing. Yeah, I mean that's a thing that happens.
And the other point I want to make, Vahe, it was well said. The SEC is it's just a different place.
Sure is.
And I'm not so sure that the move that Arkansas made in early November to fire Chad Morris had an influence on Jim Sterk's decision to fire Barry Odom, and I'm not so sure that decision didn't affect Mississippi.
Right.
Ole Miss firing its coach, saying, "Oh, look, those, Missouri can do it. We'll do it too." And,
they beat us, and they're firing their guy.
Right, and he's got a better record than our guy. So that's life in the SEC. It is, you could say that Missouri firing a football coach with a 25-25 record after 4 years means Mizzou has officially joined the SEC.
That's well said.
That's
an
you're
alum.
Right. You're right.
Yeah.
One quick thought on that too. Two quick thoughts off that, Blair. One is what was going to happen if they did hold on to him was he was going to be one of those guys going into next season, just everybody looking for when the trap door is going to fall and he's out. And if there's one situation I think that's ridiculous in college sports, it's when they fire a guy a month into a season. And that means you didn't do your job 6 months, 8 months, 10 months earlier.
That's exactly
I've always felt that way.
Yep.
So, and I think that was the wobbly kind of status he was going to have, right? I mean, maybe it would have started 4-0 or who knows, but I think that was the wobbly status he was going to have. I guess that was the main thing I was going to say.
Well, and if he did come back, he wasn't going to have his offensive coordinator because that would have been a condition of him, returning. You got fired Derek Dooley, and again, Vahe, you and I spoke to this last week. Would not have excited the fan base at all. How many season tickets would Missouri have not sold because of Barry Odom returning as the coach? And to me, that's where the reality is for Missouri in the SEC, especially when we saw the crowds of the size that we did in the last few home games. Look, fans weren't turning out anymore for this coach and this program, and they've made their feelings known by not showing up for these games. That's where the fans are. You don't have to look at social media anger to know what. Just look in the stands at games where people who are financially invested in the program. I'm sure there were 65,000 tickets sold to these games, but you only have 40,000 people in the stands. People are making decisions, and so I think that's what ultimately helped Jim Sterk make the decision that he did.
I think you're right. I think in the end, you could say the apathy speaks louder than the anger, and that shows up also in what people are going to invest and many other ways. For a school that's now $8 to $10 million down on bowl revenue, still fighting to get attendance
because of the probation.
Other things back, because of the probation. So yeah, I mean, if nothing else, that it's kind of interesting, right? I mean, I don't know that we thought about it this way, but how much this bowl ban might have affected the situation too. Well, they're out that money
financially.
We're even farther behind. So
there's I've always thought this, but I think that it speaks loudly in this situation that fans have a bigger voice in how their teams operate, just functionally in college than in the pros. I think that the quote unquote noise can have a real impact. Like in the NFL or Major League Baseball, NBA, whatever, if the GM and owner, the leadership group thinks that the coach is the right guy and can win games, that's the only thing that matters 99% of the time. But in college, you're talking about donations, you're talking about, buyouts, you're talking about all kinds of things that make and we just saw it maybe even stronger than in this Mizzou situation at Rutgers. When that Schiano stuff broke, that that the school wouldn't meet his demands, people lost their brains, and they just hired him.
Yep.
And Schiano he's another great example at Tennessee when our old buddy John Curry tried to hire him. In Tennessee, people lost their brains the other way. And whoops, we take that one back. I mean, college fans, donors, those people, they have a much bigger voice in how their teams operate than in the pros.
That's a huge, great point. And it really is funny how Schiano represents both aspects of that kind of thing. That is weird. You're making me think of this too, and I'm sure Blair's going to steer us here, but it does make me think about what is the priority. Can you get all in one here? Can you get a guy that you identify as somebody who will excite the fan base right away and also is going to be a long-term guy, or is one going to be looked at as more significant than the other in the process? I mean, do they need to, excite the base here more than they need to know that you're going to win for 7, 8, 10 years? I don't know. Maybe that's a dumb way to phrase it.
All right, well, hold that thought, Vahe. We will talk about that after the break. I want to spin it forward and talk about what the new hire will say about Missouri's ambition and sort of its self-image. We'll talk about some of the candidates and what it means for Missouri right after this.
Big O Tires is rolling out Black Friday deals now through December 8th. Get limited time Black Friday savings on oil changes, brakes, car batteries, and more. Plus, save up to $190 on select Michelin and BF Goodrich tires when you use your Big O Tires card with no interest financing for 12 full months OAC. Don't miss Black Friday deals happening now through December 8th only at Big O Tires. For your nearest participating location, go to bigotires.com.
Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian join me, Blair Kerkhoff, talking Missouri football, the coaching situation there. And before we went to break, we were talking about the the idea of a coaching search making a statement or defining the program or the self-image of the program. I think, as in all coaching searches, we call it the silly season for a reason, right? As no sooner is a coach fired or a coach resigns or a coach leaves a program that the hot board is posted, within an hour usually anymore. Who are the likely candidates to replace that? That's kind of maybe a internet phenomenon. I don't remember, I remember back in the day before the internet, you'd actually sit down and make a lot of calls.
I remember that.
and put together a list of coaching prospects, including calling the school to see if they've gotten permission to talk to. None of that happens anymore. You better have something posted pretty damn quickly. And so we did, and so did Arkansas, and so did Ole Miss, and so did Florida State, and everybody else that has a coach opening right now. So the names that are associated with Missouri now are, generally speaking, coaches of Group of Five conferences, head coaches of Group of Five, not the Power Five conferences, not the ACC, SEC, Big 12, et cetera, but coaches from Sun Belt, Conference USA, Mountain West, those types of coaches. And Missouri's gone down that road before. Gary Pinkel was a MAC coach and turned out okay for Missouri there. I see that Arkansas and Florida State have coaches from Power Five conferences on their list. Justin Fuente, for instance, from Virginia Tech, supposedly on a hot board for Arkansas. And so what does this say about Missouri? And is this the type of coach at the level of coaching that Missouri should be looking for right now? Yeah.
I don't know why Arkansas in particular should be choosing from a more accomplished class of candidate than Missouri. I think those are peer programs at worst, at absolute worst. I've always thought that schools and ADs should take a big swing or two and miss before it's all about image in college sports, and people don't like to be told no, but I don't know, I'd go see if Mike Leach has any interest in coaching in the SEC. Just do stuff like that, because if you hired Mike Leach, that's a guy that would have sort of the sizzle in the steak, for to use a corny term. I mean, that's a guy that would get people excited, but also I think be a damn good coach and be able to win some games. I think you need to swing big before you get to the level of, you don't want the fan reaction to be like, that guy's just like Barry Odom. Why did we fire Barry Odom? And I'll say this too, Jim Sterk's got a lot on the line, because as fed up as a lot of fans were, that was not just 100% he's got to go. That was not a David Beatty situation. And if Sterk gets his guy in there and that guy doesn't do both, doesn't initially get fans excited and also win games, people are going to think, you just ran a true son off. You just ran one of our guys off for this. Screw you. And that's when it becomes Jim Sterk's job. He also, and this is true this is not just Jim Sterk thing, but if you're going to fire somebody, you better have 3 or 4 people who you're interested in, and more importantly, that are interested in you, or else you're just not doing your job. And I assume Jim Sterk has that.
I mean, I've always believed that. I've never had an athletic director tell me that directly, but I've always believed that a coach doesn't make a move that Jim Sterk made without having, a list.
Yeah.
List on an index card of prospective candidates.
We think it might be in their wallets, just like my wadded up password list.
Oh man.
Yeah, you got to get that laminated or something, man. I've seen that. That is in tatters.
But nevertheless, think about this too with Jim Sterk coming here. He's coming here after Mack Rhodes has hired Barry Odom. And what does he know about Barry Odom at that point? He had to come here with a list, I guess is my point. And I think a prepared athletic director is thinking that way. Now, I'm sure that list evolves and changes, and maybe it doesn't really get physically scratched out and such. But you have to be thinking about that all the time in that job. I think any of the athletic directors we've gotten to know over the years would tell you they are always thinking about who's next, and thus, sort of the prototype of what it is they would seek to have. Now, often in these things, we will see the pendulum swing back, right? It's going to be the anti-Barry Odom. It's going to be an offensive-minded guy who's had head coaching experience, and you'd obviously like it to be a more prominent job. I love the idea of Mike Leach. I don't know if Mike Leach is a fit. I don't know if Jim Sterk likes Mike Leach, but I'd sure like to see that explored.
Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting, and after all, that's what we want, interesting.
Well, they weren't at Pullman together, but they've both been at Pullman. So I imagine there are people at Washington State that Jim Sterk could have talked to about Mike Leach.
And there's a school of thought, by the way, that he would not have hired Mike Leach there. This is from people I've talked to over the years. But again, that may not mean he wouldn't see him as a fit for this job. I mean, I don't know.
Well, he made 2 hires at Washington State. He hired Bill Doba, who succeeded, Mike Price.
Yes.
Mike Price had taken Washington State to a Rose Bowl way back when, before he got the Alabama job for about 10 minutes. And Bill Doba didn't work out, so he fires Doba and he hires Paul Wolf, who was even less successful than Bill Doba.
Am I remembering right, Blair? Is Bill Doba kind of a Barry Odom parallel? Wasn't he a coordinator?
Yes.
And came up. He was with Mike Price a long time.
I think that's right. So neither of those hires worked out at Washington State. Now he extended. I knew I shouldn't have brought this up because I can't remember his name. The coach at San Diego State who had success. So in terms of hiring football coaches, the track record's not great right now, but that's fine. Look, that's not every coach is great, and athletic directors they do get judged ultimately on their hires, and the hires at Washington State didn't prevent Jim Sterk from getting another job at San Diego State. So. But all of Jim Sterk's jobs before coming to Missouri were out west, right? They were in the Pac-12, the Mountain West Conference, that area, and he doesn't bring. I don't know what his network is or his depth of knowledge with these other guys. I just trust that he wouldn't have made this move without having done some legwork, especially over the last month as the season started to turn south.
And wouldn't have made this move now, and wouldn't have made this move coming to Columbia without understanding that this is going to be a football, football-based job is probably the wrong way to put it, but it's going to heavily revolve around the success of the football program, and he had to be nimble and thoughtful about that. Like, that's always going to be something he's got to concentrate on. Okay,
so if you're looking for the anti-Barry Odom, I guess that means Alex Grinch is out.
Well, except for one interesting twist on Alex Grinch.
Who is the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma.
Right, and defensive coordinator at Oklahoma, previously at Ohio State.
And Washington State.
So there's some interesting background there, but you're right, at least in the sort of, not even superficial, in the basic profile, it's Barry Odom, except for the Godfather factor in this, right? Or the uncle.
He's the nephew of Gary Pinkel. He's the son of Gary Pinkel's sister.
And there are those, I've heard from plenty of people the last couple of days particularly, there are those who really would tell you that one of Barry's, part of his undoing was disconnect from Pinkel. And obviously Alex Grinch would enjoy a different kind of relationship with Gary Pinkel, which I think leaves him as still somebody to think about, and just because of that.
All right, well, I'm going to give you another group of names, and I'm going to save the one that I think would be my favorite. If I had to guess who the next Missouri coach is going to be on a pie graph, this person would have the largest slice of pie. But smaller slices of pie would go to Billy Napier, who's the Louisiana coach, Mike Norvell, who's at Memphis, who I think might end up at either Florida State or Arkansas, Luke Fickett of Cincinnati, who's never coached outside of Ohio, basically, and is kind of seen as a Big Ten sort of guy. Brian Harsom, the Boise State coach, who is, a Boise guy, Northwest guy, but I think a future star as a coach. And then Lane Kiffin who's getting a lot of run at Arkansas, reportedly met with Arkansas officials in Boca Raton on Sunday, according to Dan Wolkin at USA Today. So that's my group of head coaches I also had Troy Calhoun from Air Force in that group originally. He actually talked to Missouri and Mack Rhodes back 4 years ago. So there's a sort of a group of coaches that are head coaches, group of 5 conference schools, and I think other schools would be interested in some of those guys. Florida State, Arkansas, Ole Miss. It may be a run, but I'm saving the guy who I think is the best candidate until I hear you guys' thoughts on future coaches. Well, if you say it, and I'll recognize it.
I won't say it, but not because I know who you were thinking of, just because I know who I'm about to mention. Rocky Long was the guy that you're thinking
Rocky
of.
Long at San Diego State.
I had to look it up. I'm not. Yeah,
that's right.
I'm not gonna,
you know what? I remember his name was
There's
Rocky,
no airs
but
here.
I didn't want to.
But the other thing I wanted to say is Lane Kiffin. I sort of had dismissed in my mind initially. Just screw that guy. Like he's failed. Like Mizzou is too big of a job for him. But the more that I've looked into him, the more I think he might be a hell of a hire. He got fired from Tennessee for going 7-6, basically,
which
right?
is what kind of the Tennessee standard of.
Yep. And he was, he's probably too young at that point. But he took that. USC was a tough job when he took it, and he won 10 games there a few times. And built that back up after some pretty severe. Recruiting restrictions and everything else that came in from a overstepping that I'm just editorializing here, but from the NCAA, and then FAU. Like he's
not to mention the NFL.
He's got experience there. Didn't do amazingly, right. But the Raiders have been a mess before and after that. I think that he would. Again, if we can go back to this point about like there's 2 boxes to check: initial, interest into the program. And some actual substance, because I don't think you can't just make a sizzle hire. I think that's like overextending on your credit card. It feels good in the moment, but there's a bill to pay later. But I think Lane Kiffin really could check both those boxes. So to me, I also like the idea of is it Joe Brady, the LSU coordinator, passing game. I don't know. Maybe take a chance on somebody like that of no previous head coaching experience. So
he's going to be a head coach somewhere.
Absolutely. So, but it seems like Jim Sterk really wants somebody who's done the job before. So maybe he's not a realistic candidate, but I'd think about somebody like him. Again, take a big swing at Mike Leach and see if he has any interest. But I think those 3 would be kind of the directions that I would think about.
I really like what each of you guys has said about all these guys. I don't know what I would add. I feel like it's a Rubik's Cube. A guy I was just reminding myself about Steve Sarkisian, but he had a little bit of trouble at USC that I don't know if that takes him off the radar or not. But he's offensive coordinator at Alabama now, and he's Armenian.
Boom.
And he knows some Armenian. I once threw some at him when I was out at USC for something. So no, I don't really know what else to add to that. I keep thinking less about a specific person than about trying to sort of apply the profile, and that hasn't gotten me to the person yet that I really think it'll be. One of the things I've been trying to think about with the profiling is a little different point, and it may be irrelevant, but so Missouri's now fired 6 of the 7 coaches it's had since Dan Devine left to go to the Green Bay Packers. It's had a couple.
And the one who wasn't fired retired because of illness.
Yeah, right. So I guess you'd say he left prematurely, one way or another. And, but so they've had, the true sons. They've had, Onofrio essentially, Woody Widenhofer, Barry. They've had the guy in the country, Bob Stull. He was everybody's ambition at that time. Then they had Larry Smith, who was out of coaching for a year or two.
Speaking of former Southern Cal coaches.
So the one guy who's worked is a little different on the matrix, right? It is the MAC coach. I guess theoretically Bob Stull was from about that, coming from UTEP. Bob, I think, didn't get the landscape properly, at least not in time.
Right.
Gary did, and how you differentiate, knowing whether somebody gets it is another matter.
Well, I'm going to give you a name of somebody who does understand it because he's coached in it. And I also think that having some SEC coaching experience is important for this person. Because, again, as we've stated, the SEC is just a different animal. He has Missouri experience. He has had coaching experience. He has had a couple of teams that have been wildly successful. Josh Heupel. So Josh is out there, and we know that he left Missouri 2 years ago to become the head coach at Central Florida, and he is offensive minded. He really proved to me, worked with Drew Lock, is better than Derek Dooley, I suppose. Drew Lock was the all SEC quarterback in Heupel's what proved to be Heupel's final season at Mizzou. And after going 12-0 and losing to LSU in a Fiesta Bowl, I think it was 12-0, maybe 13-0 his first year. I think he's 9-3 this year, and heading to another bowl game. I think he is ambitious and would I think he would take the job. Now, the little bit of hesitation I have is, Josh Heupel was an All-America quarterback at Oklahoma, and if Lincoln Riley ends up moving on somewhere quickly, taking the Cliff Kingsbury route to the NFL, then maybe that's the job, Josh Heupel. I would imagine Oklahoma would target him as well. But if you're Missouri, maybe you take a hard look at Josh Heupel.
Well, yes, you make a lot of great points there. I think that a reason not to hire somebody can't be he might leave for Oklahoma, because as much as I think Missouri should be shooting at bigger fish than Arkansas, I think we also understand that Oklahoma is going to take who Oklahoma wants, especially an alum. I hadn't thought that much about Heupel. That's he can win there, though. I mean, Central Florida is one of those weird paths to, sort of, I don't know if we still use this term, but, New Year's Day bowls. You can get there from Central Florida, and there's probably a logical case that it's harder to do in a conference like the SEC than it is from Central Florida. But, man, you're right. Like, he's got all the connections, spent time in Columbia.
What's funny is we had talked about him before, and he just wasn't in my mind at all until you brought him back up, and you brought him back up in a pretty powerful way. I mean, that's a pretty striking profile for this.
Yeah.
One question I would have, unless I'm forgetting, he hasn't been a head coach before this,
Until Central Florida. That's right.
So he's been through two seasons.
Just a couple years, but that gives him 2 more years than Barry Odom had.
It does, but it does leave that question open about a full recruiting cycle. What's he got for that? And I don't know one way or another whether he's a good recruiter or not.
It's a good point.
But it's just a thing. Now, a lot of these other guys we talked about, we might not have really seen that answered. And if we're talking about Group of 5, we're not seeing it answered at this same level too. So there's going to be questions about anybody. But that profile, as you described it, before even saying his name, it's pretty compelling.
Would he be the kind of hire that might sell, 5,000 season tickets on the day it's announced? I don't know if there's a ton of sizzle there.
I don't know if there would be either.
I don't think so. I don't think it would be like that.
But I think you could sell him.
Yeah, I think you could sell him. I think you could, I'll do the air quotes around win the press conference for what that's worth. But then it's going to be proof in the pudding for a couple of years. I don't know what this team, that's the other thing. No matter who the coach is, I don't really have a feel for what this team is poised to do next year. I just don't know.
Well, the freshman quarterback was it Achilles?
Yes. So was it Achilles or ACL? I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Connor Bazelak.
Yeah.
But he's obviously not going to start this. Won't be out there in the spring. So they still have the Sean Robinson, the TCU transfer. So I don't know either. But it's going to be an interesting spring at Missouri, just as it was this past spring for Kansas State and Kansas. Let's wrap this up by just a quick thought on both of those. The regular season's over for both of those schools as well. Let's give a grade here for how about the Kansas State season and the Kansas season. with Chris Kleiman at K-State, 8-4, heading to a bowl game, and Les Miles at KU, 3-9, not going to a bowl game. But let's start with K-State. Let's just give it a grade let's give K-State a grade for this season.
I'm happy to give an A here. I mean, remember they were picked for whatever that's worth, ninth
Yep.
in the conference. He's taken over for a legend. Program was in a little bit of a funny place. Couldn't quite tell where the talent was, and this guy just energized it. Had a plan. Played, I think pretty fundamentally sound football that's pleasing to the K-State fan. Right? Of course, more pleasing when you win. I don't think this is what people would have expected this season. Maybe would have hoped for it. And I think also it's not really just about this season. I think you can feel the energy from this guy that this is going to be something with some continuity.
What do you think, Sam?
I was going to say A-, just to leave some room, because what if he went 9-3 or 10-2?
The West Virginia loss kind of the Oklahoma win was offset by the West Virginia loss. Yeah,
there were some sort of I can't think of another term, the growing pains. But I mean, there was some. It wasn't just an avalanche, but I mean, that Oklahoma win was the biggest win that program had in several years. And that's the kind of thing that you can take straight to recruits, and you can sell the hell out of that. I also, that's the headliner from the season, but I think the Iowa State win, I think that's important too, that you finish the season that way. And I think that Iowa State is basically a peer program. I think K-State is probably on maybe a half a step above, but whatever. Like basically a peer program in the conference, and to keep that win in a coach's first year, to win more games than the legendary coach did in his last season that you're replacing. I just think that, I'm saying A-, and that's a great grade, right? But I would love my kids to get A- forever. But there's a little bit of, you're right, West Virginia. You still lost 4 games. But I just don't know how you can not be encouraged by what he did in his first year.
I just remember thinking, as the season was starting, he always had better players at North Dakota State. What's it going to be like when he doesn't and players as good as the ones and he beats Oklahoma?
Yep.
So that showed me the coaching chops.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I'm with you guys. The A- either way, I won't quibble. I just think he did an outstanding job. He won't be coach of the year in the conference because Matt Rule and Baylor, they were picked down.
Matt Rule.
Look, how long is that guy going to be at Baylor? He's already, he's talked to the NFL each of the last 2 years. But man, that guy, he'll be on some hot boards. Hot boards. Okay, let's start with you, Sam, on KU. 3-9. 1-8 in the conference, last place again for the Jayhawks. I get a little different feeling though about where we are with Kansas after this season.
Yeah, so maybe this is harsh, but I'm going to say C-, which is that's not harsh. Passing grade, but they didn't win more games than David Beatty did in his last year, right? And David Beatty won a conference game last year. And
beat TCU at home.
Yeah, and so I know, that there was it felt like real stuff with the Texas game, taking them down to the wire, and then
the Boston College game early in the season.
Yeah, that BC, the blowout. And then, but I still wanted to see what they could do in the conference. And when they did Texas, and I know they lost the game, but still.
And then Iowa State toward the end as well when they had the lead in the fourth quarter of the games.
And won a game, kind of a fluky play, but still won a game in the league. I thought, okay, there's some real stuff going. But that Baylor game, they were outmatched, but that's hard to get out of your mind of just getting slobbered like that. I mean, just absolutely just soul crushed. That looked like, David Beatty's worst game or Turner Gill's worst game. And so... Look, C-, I think is fair. It's a passing grade, but it's you got to prove more than that.
What is that on the GPA scale? Is that like a 1.8?
I don't know. It's a 70%. I do know my C- from college wasn't that long ago that I can't remember what I needed to get for a C-.
It's a gentleman's grade.
Yeah, exactly.
The gentleman's C-.
Not showing off. Not falling too far behind. I think we all like that.
What do you think, Vahe?
I'll creep up just a little tick to like a C+. because I do think there's a different energy about it. But a lot of that's just sort of the vestiges of the early part of the season. I mean, the way they went out. And the thing that summed up this season for me was the K-State game. Just got drilled in a game where you've got the stands full in Lawrence. This is your moment to show you've come somewhere, and they just aren't there. I think Sam has sort of identified this for a while that, I mean, the play here with Les Miles was never going to be about the first season, right? But you want to have a little more, substance going into next year, and they don't. That said, I assume we're going to see better players there in the next year or two, and let's see what comes. I think you've reason to be more optimistic than you were a year ago.
I'll say a C, just for the reasons you guys mentioned. There were some real highs. They had, that Boston College win was unlike anything we'd seen for Kansas, and it was coming off the really disappointing the Pinata game of Coastal Carolina. I still love that. Yeah. Turned it into a verb.
Yeah. And the part of this too is Dearman. The OC kind of seemed to change. Was given credit for, they ran a lot of RPOs in that BC game, and
right.
Then
he got the job on the full-time basis.
Yeah, and scored. What was the final 50-48? I think it was
something like, I think it was in that range, maybe 48, 45 or something.
Yeah, scored a boatload of points
right.
on a nationally ranked. So, but again, that Baylor game, maybe I should get that out of my head. But if you're a program trying to build up, and again, understand like. You ran into a buzzsaw, and the other side had better players and everything, but at least give a better effort, at least, lose by 25 or something, not 1,000.
Well, at least with Kansas now, I guess 3 wins is the baseline. Now you go from here. You're not starting with 0 or 1. You're
true.
starting with 3. And now you need to see improvement at Kansas. Now it's got to get up to close to bowl eligibility beginning next year, as far as Kansas fans should be concerned. All right, Vahe, Gregorian, Sam Mellinger, thanks for stopping by, you guys.
Thanks, Blair.
And we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Blair.
That does it for another episode of SportsBeat KC, presented by Big O Tires. And it concludes the podcast duties of our producer, Leah Becerra. She's on her way to a terrific job at the Neiman Foundation. She'll be working at Harvard as the organization's digital and audience engagement editor for the foundation and its publications. Look, it's no SportsBeat KC, but... just kidding, Leah. You're the nicest marathon running former geek squatter I ever met, and you will be missed. Best of luck in Boston. Links to our stories can be found in the show notes, and we'll be back on Wednesday for another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.